Welcome to this edition of Soul of Warren County. I'm your host, Mickey Gwynn. For centuries, Christians have celebrated Christmas. In 1966, a new, more African-centric celebration was born. It's celebrated starting the day after Christmas and lasts for multiple days. This celebration is known as Kwanzaa. And even though Kwanzaa has been around for over 55 years now, there's still a little bit of mystery concerning this celebration. Well, today, hopefully we can clear up some of that mystery. I have in the studio with me today Dr. Adonijah Bakari, an associate professor of history and director of Africana Studies at Middle Tennessee State University. And Dr. Bakari is going to educate all of us about this celebration known as Kwanzaa. Dr. Bakari, welcome to Soul of Warren County.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
And I guess our request is pretty simple. Tell us about Kwanzaa.
Well, you know, every year people ask me, hey Doc, you know, what's that thing that's so celebrated after Christmas?
Right.
You know, that black holiday. So, you know, I'm really happy to be here to talk about Kwanzaa. And, you know, Kwanzaa, as quiet as it's kept, really isn't a holiday. It's not based on any type of religious or spiritual manifestation out of a personhood. But it's really a remembrance of the things that make community important and how communities become successful. So, like you said, Kwanzaa is celebrated over a number of days, 7 to be exact, from December 26th through January 1st. And it starts in 1966 with a pretty radical thinker at the time, Maulana Karenga. And Karenga's idea was, it comes from this place, this theory that he had called Kawaida. And Kawaida was a theory for how to best develop community and healthy people. So Karenga's theory was that if we as African American people remember who we are based on our culture, it will help us politically, economically, socially, culturally. So Karenga was considered a cultural nationalist.
Okay.
He starts an organization called US, and it was literally US, us. And this organization sought to train and research and inform people about our culture, our cultural heritage, in coming out of Africa and, you know, within the United States. So Karenga's celebration of Kwanzaa, the idea actually is sparked in about 65 when he starts to develop what he calls the Nguzo Saba. And the Nguzo Saba was the ideas around these 7 days. So in 66, he develops it as a full-blown holiday, right? Celebration of the first fruits, and that's what Kwanzaa actually stands for. The idea is taken from the terminology comes out of Kiswahili, comes out of East Africa, out of the Swahili language. And the idea of the celebration of the first fruits actually comes out of South Africa. And it was a celebration of the harvest festival. Not too dissimilar from what we think about when we think about Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And so Karenga starts this with his organization in about 66. And I'm originally from Chicago. And growing up, you know, we heard about Kwanzaa, people talked about Kwanzaa.
Right.
When I got to high school and maybe college, we did some Kwanzaa celebrations. But by and large, I think for many African Americans, Kwanzaa was one of those things that made people scratch their heads. You know, people would say, well, I'm a Christian, I'm not going to celebrate a non-Christian holiday. And I understand that, but I want to emphasize for your viewers that Kwanzaa has nothing to do with religiosity. Mm-hmm. You know, so you could be a Muslim or a Christian or a Hebrew and still celebrate Kwanzaa, because the best communities, those communities that really prosper and are vibrant, are already practicing the Kwanzaa principles. Mm-hmm. So these 7 principles, let me give the principles. We have Ujima, unity. We have Kujishagalia, self-determination. Ujama, collective work. Ujima, collective responsibility. What's the Kaumba, creativity. Imani or Nia and Imani. So that's Nia is purpose, Imani is faith. Okay. And so, you know, when we think about, say, this idea of Kujishagalia, we say we have a self-determining, that African Americans, we come out of slavery, and our ancestors, that was first and foremost in their mind, that we want to be a people who can take care of ourselves, feed ourselves, name ourselves, you know, do for ourselves. And over 200 communities, black communities, are founded right after slavery. Mm-hmm. Today, when we think about this idea of self-determination, you know, we can learn something from our ancestors. And that's what Karinga wanted. He was saying that when you look at other communities, these principles are in play, they're in place. You know, so if, I know people say, well, I can't remember those names. I'm a historian, I can't remember the names sometimes, right? But the names aren't important, but the concept is what's really important. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that the celebration started in 1966. Mm-hmm. We've gone a number of years down that pathway, if you will. I was reading an article that said, I don't think it was based on statistics, but it was saying that the Kwanzaa celebration sort of waned over the years. Looking at our country now and the very well-known divisions that we have, both culturally, politically, and things of that nature, do you think that Kwanzaa still had a purpose, or had it accomplished something, if you will, in the years that we've been celebrating? Or do you think maybe it just didn't get that push that it needed to really bring that unity and bring our cultures together? I mean, do you have any personal thoughts on the, I don't want to say benefits, but the benefits maybe of Kwanzaa?
That's a good one. And, you know, I think when I look at, say, like my children, they were Kwanzaa kids. Okay. So they came up with the full Kwanzaa spread. And I think that type of that type of education, that type of cultural enrichment really impact kids. Mm-hmm. The thing is that I think Kwanzaa was really, it was practiced more in your bigger cities, you know, Chicago, yes, New York, mm-hmm, Baltimore, DC, your northern cities. Mm-hmm. Now, when I came south, and, you know, I've been here almost 30 years, there was a yearly Kwanzaa celebration in Nashville, and it was pretty well attended. Mm-hmm. So I would say that children who grew up celebrating Kwanzaa, I think it was eye-opening for them. I think it was impactful. For the larger country, I think it was a place of pride where African Americans could say, you know, we have our celebration. We have Jewish people who have their celebration, and Christians have their celebrations, and Muslims have theirs. So we have ours also. I think that was a point of pride. And I think that because of the unrest, you know, because of George Floyd's murder and all those things that led up to it, that we will probably see a resurgence of Kwanzaa. Definitely we're seeing a resurgence of homeschooling in the African American community. And when you start to homeschool, you know, you start to look for information that talks about African American history or Black history, and you've got to come across Kwanzaa.
Right,
so
right.
I think that this will be a new age for the next generation, that we probably will see more Kwanzaa celebrations in the coming years.
I was just wondering, in America, being a capitalistic society that we are, sort of money talks. And one of the biggest complaints that you hear from many people about Christmas even, that the commercialization of Christmas has overshadowed the spiritual and Christian belief of Christmas. Do you think maybe Kwanzaa, maybe to its own detriment, didn't have that commercialization, even though I've seen more? I mean, I think you can go out and sort of Google Kwanzaa, if you will, and see more apparel that you can buy, and you can find the 7, you know, candelabras, and things those things of that nature. But you know, sometimes I just wondered if maybe it just didn't catch on commercially, and I know that's not why it was established by all means, but it sometimes in our society it almost takes that PR. It almost takes being splashed across the TV screens for people to take notice, and maybe that wasn't as much of an effort for Kwanzaa as, say, for Christmas or maybe even Easter or Black Friday. I mean, those things that are so much based on commercialism, and that's probably not a good thing, but I think that happens.
You know, Mickey, I mean, it's almost like it was the victim of Karinga's idea that this is not going to be commercialized. Right. So it wasn't commercialized. Right. And because it wasn't commercialized, you know, folks in small towns and folks who were just busy with their day-to-day lives seem to have missed Kwanzaa. You're right. And I think now we see, like you said, more Kwanzaa paraphernalia. I was looking at Christmas cards, and I saw, you know, Kwanzaa cards. And I think if you get online, you know, if you're looking at many stores now, they do talk about you know, gifts for Kwanzaa, but I think also one of the major things about Kwanzaa, and will it ever be, you know, fully commercialized, is that because it wasn't based on so much as giving to individuals as community empowerment, that the toys, and usually they weren't even toys, they were gifts of education and gifts of knowledge that were given. So these were quite often books or games that you had to do some type of strategy for, or puzzles or models, something that kids could you know, learn from. So I don't think, even if Kwanzaa got splashed across, you know, the New York Times, that it'll ever be as commercialized as Christmas. But I think some commercialization would help it become more known, you know, in small towns and rural America, and folks who typically wouldn't see themselves as, necessarily pro-black. Yeah.
What would you say to someone who maybe would ask you, why do we need Kwanzaa? We're so far past our, days of bringing slaves from Africa, and we're so far past that. We do Black History Month, we have other things going on. Why would we need Kwanzaa? What would be your response to someone who maybe approached you in that way?
I would say that we need Kwanzaa now probably more than in 1966.
Okay.
Because, while there's a resurgence of African Americans realizing and looking at our place in this society, there's also a resurgence of a pushback to our requests for social justice, political reforms, policing. There's this pushback. And there's always been this pushback. When we think about African Americans coming out of enslavement and during Reconstruction, that for the first time in American history, African Americans were politically engaged, and we were socially engaged and culturally engaged. 1866 to about 1875 or so. And at that point, there's a pushback. The rise of the Ku Klux Klan, the rise of white nationalism. So historians don't find this pushback strange. And because we're getting this pushback politically and socially, I think that for African Americans, the need, not necessarily Kwanzaa, but the concept of community development is needed. When we think about the days of Kwanzaa, we talk about unity, we talk about economic empowerment, we talk about, we've always had kuumba, this idea of creativity. We see it in our music, we see it in our dance. We've had the idea of imani, faith, that it's in our churches. But the idea of Ujamaa, collective responsibility, or collective economics, that's something that we solely need. I was talking to somebody, and they were talking about gas prices.
Right.
And I said, when we think about the Muslim and Arab world, that they have come together and decided what gas prices are going to be.
Sure.
That's collective economics. That all good businessmen realize that if you want prices to be high, that you've got to start to control the market. But we in the African American community, we don't collectively engage with other people, other businesses in the Black community. And I think the murder of George Floyd has reawakened this idea that we had before integration, because during segregation, we had to engage.
Right.
Now we have the choice, and I think one of the healthy choices that we should make is to re-engage. If there's a Black bookstore in Nashville, there's a Black bookstore, a Kibalan, so that folks can say, it's easy for me to go on Amazon and order this book. I've got to drive for 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour, maybe an hour if you're coming from, here, to get to a Kibalan. But going to a Kibalan would not only be just buying a book, that you're engaging with the whole community. There are people flowing in and out. There are vendors who are there selling other goods. Right. So that there's this larger world about economics that we miss if we simply buy from Amazon.
So even though it was more of a cultural origin for Kwanzaa, it still has that economic point. And I think we talk about communities and buying. We even see that with yearly here with buy locally, that kind of thing.
That's right.
Sort of a similar type of concept of utilizing African American vendors and things of that nature. So it's a similar type of concept But like you say, it seems like it sort of goes back to the economics on whether or not that celebration is going to be national and really, really, endeavored throughout the years, and maybe Kwanzaa sort of maybe suffered from that a little bit. I wanted to talk about something you just mentioned to me, so I don't want to throw you off guard. But you visited Ethiopia.
Oh, yeah.
You've been to Africa. One of my lifelong desires has been to go to Africa. Would you mind just talking? I know the show is about Kwanzaa, but would you mind talking a little bit about your experience when you were in Ethiopia and what type of thoughts sort of went through your mind as you were touring that country?
Well, I've, and not to blow my whistle, but because I'm a professor and, MTSU has really encouraged faculty members to travel.
Okay.
So I've been to probably 10 different African countries.
Oh, okay, okay.
And Ethiopia is really a wonderful, wonderful country. And it's hard for people to imagine because of Ethiopia gets such bad press. In the 80s, there was the famine, and now there's the civil war.
Right.
But in and of itself, the country is a very proud country. The people are very proud. Mm-hmm. They're always ready to tell you that they were never colonialized. They say, when you look at West Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Gambia, Senegal, colonialism was there,
right.
but they were never colonized. And the history of so many religions starts in Ethiopia. We got Judaism that starts in Ethiopia. The Ethiopians call themselves Beta Israel, the house of Israel. So you got your Falasha Jews. Christianity, is there. So it's a rich country. It's a very scenic country because it's high, So there are all of these mountains and valleys and what they call the highlands.
Okay.
So it's a rolling country. It's a country that's rich in culture. You have your Coptic Christians who are in Ethiopia. You've got your Hebrews, what they call the Falasha Jews are in Ethiopia. Many of them have been flown out of Ethiopia and taken into Israel. But it's one of the countries I would tell folks, yes, if you're going to visit, after this war is over, pay a visit to Ethiopia. On a closer to home, when you think about Africa, we think about maybe Ghana or Nigeria, Senegal.
Right.
And those places, are definitely worth seeing also.
We growing up, I can remember back in my younger years, the saying was always, got to go back to the motherland. That was always to say, I'm going to go back to the motherland kind of thing. And I really always wanted to do that. In your travels in Africa, if you mentioned Kwanzaa, would they know what you were talking about?
Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah. Because I think that's one thing that you pointed out. It's pretty much a primarily African American celebration.
Right.
Okay. So you would almost have to educate the Native Africans on what we're doing here in America.
That people would understand the idea of, and I want people to realize that when we think about Africa, we think about a rural, usually largely rural communities. Mm-hmm. But, if you go into Dakar, which is in Senegal, big city. If you go into Johannesburg or Cape Town, in South Africa, big cities. That most of Africa is big city, all right? That's where the largest percentage of your population lives. Okay. If you go into Nigeria and you go into Lagos, big city. Big city. Mm-hmm. So, that people would understand the Harvest Festival, and they would probably tell you, oh yes, I remember my grandfather
harvesting yams. But me, just like us.
Right,
Most
right.
of us, maybe we harvest some tomatoes,
Right.
but nothing else. That's about all we've harvested. So there's very little difference between 21st century Nigerians and 21st century African Americans.
Interesting. Interesting.
When I would wear traditional garb, when I was in Nigeria, I had my traditional clothes on, and somebody told me, brother, you are an American. What is this you have on? If you don't want to wear your jeans, I'll wear them. They're urbanites, and they understand life from a urban perspective, definitely.
Good, good.
But I want to tell people that folks always say, I would like to go to Africa, but it's so far away. 7 hours that you can fly from New York and be in Senegal, 7 hours. And you're looking at probably $1,200, $1,500 round fare air. Wonderful hotels where, if you want small hotels, kind of like Airbnb, they're there. If you want big hotels, Hilton, Marriott, they're there. The first time I went, it's been over 30 years, my mother says, where are you gonna stay? I said, Mom, we have a hotel. I was taking students to Senegal.
Right.
And she said, She said, I've seen National Geographic. I haven't seen any hotels in Africa, right? So when I went and came back, she said, did you stay in a hotel? I said, you were right, Mom, no hotels. We stayed in trees. And she turned to my father, she said, and we let our son go and he had to stay in a tree. My dad was just shaking his head like, oh, Lord. So, yeah, you could have, the finer comforts of life, just like what we see here.
Yeah.
Lots of times when I talk to people, they say, I went on safari. If you go into Southern Africa or East Africa, you can do safari. But if you're going into largely West Africa, the real thrilling thing is to meet people. People will invite you home. They'll cook for you. They want to know us just like we want to know them.
Right.
Because there's just as much misinformation about Americans. I tell people I'm from Chicago and they say, oh, yeah, Al Capone.
At one time, yes,
one
right?
time, right. So it's, I would say that there are some wonderful study abroad trips coming from MTSU that community people can engage with. There are organizations, especially in Nashville and some larger cities that community people can go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to look into that.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'll send you something.
Yeah,
I'll
okay.
send you some information.
I have to look into that. And, but Dr. Bakari, I want to say thank you for coming by and talking to us about
I've enjoyed it.
Kwanzaa and other things. I'm gonna provide you an open invitation. I think our audience would like to hear more about your trips to Africa too.
Hey, I will be happy to come, and if folks send you information and ask questions, let me know. I'll come back and answer.
Well, I appreciate that. We'd like to have you back because I've always been interested in the motherland. So we'll have to have you back.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Happy Kwanzaa, happy holidays to you and your family. All right.
Let me see. The saying for Kwanzaa is Habaragani. What's the news?
What's the news? All right. We learned something new today again.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today. I'm Mickey Gwynn, and please join us for the next edition of Soul of Warren County. Until then, make every day a great day.